Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Rebooting Recycling and Solid Waste Communications in the New Normal. Let's start out with a little introduction of Recollect. We don't just build great solid waste communication tools, we help you foster change as well. We at Recollect are a tight-knit team of passionate, authentic, and purpose-driven people committed to changing the waste and recycling industry one organization at a time. We're a technology company with well over 40 years combined experience in the waste recycling and technology space. We build digital recycling education and outreach tools since 2009 for government agencies, waste haulers, educational institutions, and business organizations alike. We are leaders in public policy, technology experts, data ninjas, and highly experienced sustainability and recycling educators. We have a deep understanding of recycling and education outreach, and we are more than happy to have you here with us today. Now to introduce myself, my name is Jenny English, and I came to Recollect as having previously been a customer. So it's been really fun to see things from sort of both sides of the coin, if you will. I have experience working in the solid waste and recycling industry for the past 10 or so years, working in positions from the promotion and education of recycling programs to even supervising landfill operations. Now I'll hand it off to my colleague, Kelly, who will introduce herself.
Thanks, Jenny. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Millman, and I'm a Waste Solutions Manager here at Recollect. I have previous experience working in both public and private sector for the waste industry. And today, I work closely with the communities Recollect serves to provide solutions for emerging industry problems. So let's talk about the initial response. I'm sure many of you have felt this. It's been a bit of a whirlwind. There's been a lot of changes taking place. So it's important to take stock of these changes so we can learn from them moving forward. Many of the communities I've spoken with have had to adjust operating hours or even cancel and postpone their bulky item collection services. And then their MRF production has actually slowed down due to staffing restrictions. In some cases, the material going into the very same MRF has increased. There's also increases to traffic and volume to drop-off centers and landfills. And perhaps the biggest issue being felt by all right now is budget reallocation, whether that be for PPE or other safety precautions.
Whirlwind is a really great way of putting it, Kelly. Now let's dive in a little bit further and break this down by each different program type. To start, we'll look at potential changes that you may have had to make to your curbside collection program. Through speaking with our customers and many non-customers across North America, we learned that many municipalities and counties luckily did not have to make changes to their core curbside collection programs like garbage and recycling. While on the other hand, many had to postpone or cancel leaf and yard debris collections or their bulky item collection events. So to take stock, you'll want to know, do you have an effective means of communicating important information immediately to residents? Will schedules resume to normal? Do postponed programs like the bulky item collection, the leaf and yard waste, will those start up again? And what, if any, worker safety measures will you maintain going forward? So things like mandatory sanitization of trucks between shifts, are collection routes shorter or longer to maintain appropriate distancing between workers? And last, but certainly not least, will you need to educate residents about any related material changes? So that brings me over to my next point. Let's talk about the accepted materials and any changes you may have been required to make here. We've heard that some municipalities did need to make changes to their recycling programs. In many cases, the changes were only temporary due to COVID. While some municipalities have expanded their recycling programs, some have changed what is accepted, while others saw an opportunity to increase their efforts to combat contamination. And how have you had to make changes to the materials that you accept? COVID presents additional challenges for many. Changes to the materials that are being accepted or short staffing have posed particular issues. And that, we find, has really driven a lot of the changes that we've seen around what's accepted or what's being communicated to residents. For example, some things that we've seen in a lot of cases is that municipalities are now having to communicate to residents and let them know that, what they need to do with used masks, what they should be doing with used gloves, and making sure that those kinds of things are not ending up in our recycling streams, but rather placed in the garbage where they belong. Some municipalities were required to even cancel recycling collection, which is really unfortunate. So, how are you going to let residents know about alternatives to those curbside recycling programs if there are any available? And how are things going to look moving forward? Will you be able to open some of those facilities again? And will recycling collection resume to normal?
That's right. There's a lot to consider when it comes to regular curbside programs, but we also have to look at drop-off facility programs. So many drop-off facilities have had significant changes to their operating practices, since they have to consider things like safety concerns around the materials being dropped off and lineups of residents when they're coming to drop those materials off. Meanwhile, residents have been at home with a lot more time on their hands, maybe have been ramping up their spring cleaning and have a lot more materials, larger materials that they need to dispose of. So there could be a backlog of materials here and a lot to consider for getting back to normal. So some questions we need to ask here: did your facility shut down? And if so, how are you communicating the reopening of those facilities? If they're reopening, how are you going to ensure physical distancing measures are in place for your visitors? And are there going to be things your residents need to know ahead of time? So will they need to wear masks? Are there any special instructions? Will there be sanitizer available? That sort of thing. They also have to look at what materials are being accepted. Is it going to go back to normal and you're accepting everything? Or is there going to be some new limitations in place here? And then, are there going to be any permanent closures of facilities? And if so, how will this be communicated? Another program issue we might learn from is the changes to curbside services, such as bulky item programs. So many of these programs were canceled or postponed due to staff shortages and safety requirements. So to get ramped back up, we need to consider whether or not these programs are even going to be reinstated, and whether there are any changes required if they are being reinstated. So I've heard from a number of communities that are switching to by request programs instead of offering scheduled collection dates for all residents. So this really works to improve efficiency and reduce staff allocation. But as part of that, we need to look at how residents are going to book an appointment when they do need a pickup required. And then, will there be any new restrictions or limitations moving forward?
By now you understand that there's a lot of things that you're going to need to communicate with your residents. While on the surface we may think that perhaps not all that many changes have happened, certainly there's a lot of new things to be communicated. So how and where do we communicate those things with residents? What I've come to learn in my experience working for local and regional governments is that it's very important to meet people where they are. What I mean by that is that it's important to provide information people are looking for in a way that makes most sense for them. We need to connect to our audience where they are researching ideas and where they choose to go get information to educate themselves with. And that place, predominantly these days, is digital. Here's a few things that we've learned from some studies being done recently. So today, nearly 60% of the world's population is already online, and that amounts to 4.5 billion people. As of January 2020, approximately 3.8 billion people are using social media, and the average internet user, wait for it, now spends 6 hours and 43 minutes online each day. It's really hard to believe that we spend that much of our time online, but really that's just the way it is these days. In another study done by Hootsuite, mobile now accounts for over 50% of all internet users. Another thing I'd like to add here is that here at Recollect, one thing that we've realized is while there's a perception that a lot of these people who are using internet to get the information or perhaps relying on mobile apps and that sort of thing, we see that a lot of elderly people are actually using these tools as well and happen to be very thankful that there is a digital tool that they can use and rely on. So it's time to go out with the old. Now, while there are many communication methods available, it's important to consider the opportunity cost of inaccurate or dated information. Printed materials and cart decals, for example, are a great quick reference for residents, but what happens when there are changes to what's accepted in a program? Effectively, now you have all of these people who have resources that they believe to be the right thing to do, but if something has changed, what are we going to do to make sure that they understand something has changed? This also presents a really good reason on to why we maybe should move away from relying on those traditionally paper-heavy forms of communication. We find that relying on them means changes will need to be updated, reprinted, and redistributed. So when we talk about reallocating budget, as Kelly had mentioned, now we're talking about having to repay for something that we've already paid for because simple changes have already been made. So the other thing we would also like to consider here is that, with a printed material, when the things get changed and a resident receives a new material, what's being done with that previous brochure or that previous recycling guide that they received? We can only hope that it's being recycled properly or disposed of in whatever way makes sense in that location. So it's important to really consider that opportunity cost of dated information. Also, when it comes to simple things like changes to collection schedules for things that were totally unforeseen. So in the case where you're printing and mailing calendars to residents, that's a lot of budget allocated towards doing that. And in a case like where COVID came up, or perhaps you're in a location that gets hit by hurricanes quite a lot, you really have to consider, is the collection program going to be completely disrupted by an event? And how do you communicate throughout that time?
That's right. It's really important to think about the future here. So Recollect has learned a lot from this pandemic. We actually designed our tools to allow communities to communicate with their residents directly and in real time. But what we didn't know when we were designing those tools is just how essential that communication method would be under times of pressure. So moving forward, we know there is a need from the waste industry to employ a digital communication tool as part of their new normal. So why have these digital communication methods proven to be so important during this time? It's because constant outreach and engagement are key. We need to make it easy for residents to access information via their phones, because that's where they're looking for information, and online. Having the capability to send instant service alerts, notifications, and reminders is essential when your programs are constantly changing and under pressure. Having these digital communication tools ensures you as a community and a service provider are the trusted source of information. So your residents aren't relying on their neighborhood Facebook chats, they're not relying on the community next door, they're relying on you. And we need to move away from these paper-based products in a paper-based world, because offering online resources allows us to make up-to-date information constantly available. So let's look at how to reboot your digital strategy. There are a lot of benefits that come with implementing digital communication solutions as part of your post-COVID strategy. Of course, it's going to mean investing in mitigation methods and reducing the impact of a future crisis, but there are also everyday benefits to consider here. So one of those benefits is you will have the capability to develop a direct line of communication with your residents. So not just crisis mode communications. For example, many communities we serve have created campaigns to educate residents weekly about confusing materials and materials leading to contamination. They now have the ability to start conversations with residents, so they're constantly engaging with their program information. Imagine having the ability to use resident interaction metrics to help make data-driven decisions. So being able to see what residents are confused about and then targeting and incorporating those specific materials into your communication plan. That capability is impactful. So we need to add agility here. We don't want residents relying on stagnant print flyers moving forward when we have the ability to supply updated information and deploy new messaging at any time.
Now let's look at rebooting your strategy on a program-by-program basis. Much like what we just did, taking stock of those things, now it's time to look at things going forward. Now, more than ever, municipalities are finding it's important to refresh their communication strategy. Moving to digital ultimately allows you to communicate important information instantly, and digital solutions like Recollect will allow you to incorporate new routes into one seamless experience so residents are kept up to date with any program changes. Sending service alerts keeps residents in the know in a timely manner so they don't call in wondering why their stuff hasn't been collected yet. Furthermore, having the ability to send location-specific service alerts becomes really important, because then that way we're not creating a ton of noise for residents who maybe don't need to be confused by, only a certain part of a town or a municipality being affected by a recycling change or collection change when it's not affecting them. Most importantly, though, you retain full control over the messaging, so you know that residents are getting the right information right when you need it. And again, having that information and ability to access this kind of stuff 24/7, 365 days a year, not only are the residents able to do that, but you yourself are able to then go ahead and make changes like this. Here's an example of a tool that we have here at Recollect. We create both collection schedules as well as drop-off event or special event calendars for our customers. And the intent there is to allow residents to sign up for a reminder so they can be reminded of whatever event may be coming. So it could be with a collection calendar, they may be looking at an event that's happening for curbside collection, so things like leaf and yard waste, or their regular garbage and recycling collection. On the other hand, what you can see on the screen here is a screenshot of our event calendar tool, which allows you to incorporate information about your drop-off facilities. This type of information can also be included in your collection calendar, but if you're not an entity that offers curbside collection, maybe it makes sense to just focus on, sort of the community events, things like HHW and, maybe other types of shred events or those kinds of things where residents can come drop off materials. Similarly, let's look at rebooting your strategy around educating residents and having them understand what goes in what bin. Now more than ever, it's more important to make sure that residents can get correct information on how to sort their waste and recycling properly. We're understanding through conversations with our customers and non-customers that people are having to pay, or municipalities are having to pay, higher amounts, sometimes even triple the amount, to dispose of materials that are just really contaminating the recycling stream. This is a huge problem for your budget. So how do we help eradicate that? We do that by simply making sure that residents understand what should and should not be going in the recycling bins. So using digital communication tools can help guide residents to make those right decisions about what goes where and decreasing your contamination and recycling rates, thereby hopefully decreasing the amount of money being spent having to haul all that information and pay those extra tipping fees. Digital also means it's easy to keep this information up to date, so residents are always seeing the most relevant information. You, as a Recollect customer, retain full access to make any change to your program information at any time, anywhere that you've got access to a web browser, even if it's on your cell phone. Here we see a screenshot of the Waste Wizard tool that we have available. This is a simple tool that allows your residents to simply type in what they're looking to get rid of. They can see a list of items will pop up as they type, so in case they're using a synonym of a different material, the system will still understand what they're talking about. We're able to translate this tool into many different languages, and importantly, just like all of our tools, are audited by accessibility professionals to ensure that it fits within your policy of accessibility on your website. In the other screen, we can see an example of some of the metrics that are pulled from those tools. So as Kelly had mentioned, it's really important to make data-driven decisions. And so you're able to do that when you're able to actually garner data from how residents are interacting with tools and getting a better idea of maybe what they're most confused about or what information is most important to them.
That's right. And as I mentioned before, the changes didn't just affect your regular curbside collection programs, they've also highly impacted bulky item collection programs. So these programs have been hit extra hard, and there's a lot to consider to get them back up and running and properly performing for residents. So some things that program managers have had to consider when looking at getting them back up and running is reducing long lineups at drop-off facilities, helping to curb illegal dumping, and improve efficiency overall. We can help communities to employ these improvements by allowing residents to access their program information online and actually self-serve, which in turn reduces call volumes and staff time required to run these programs. As a result of booking online, residents will receive reminders of when to place their items at the curb, and this helps to ensure that there are less missed pickups or dry runs. We can also capture revenue for these programs if your community is charging for special collections, and we could do this by offering an online payment method through the tool. So just to give you a better idea of what the solution looks like and how it empowers your residents to self-serve, residents can select items to be picked up. Then they can pick from a list of next available dates according to route. Once they submit that request, they're going to receive confirmation plus a reminder to get that item at the curb at the proper time. And perhaps most importantly, you as the service provider will receive all the information you require to complete that request efficiently. So digital is here to stay. Now more than ever, it is important to continue to develop a digital strategy as an essential part of any communications plan. Digital solutions allow us to be agile in times of change. It feels like just yesterday that change was the China ban, and today, unfortunately, it's a pandemic. These solutions are going to allow you to drive behavior change, engage residents, and actually cut costs by reducing call volumes and improving efficiency. It's time to build our programs for the future, programs where we're available in real time. Digital is here, and it's about the present, not the future. It's about strengthening our communication with our residents, and it's about branding and engagement. Finally, digital is about building trust and truly changing recycling behavior.
That's right. So on behalf of Recollect, I would like to thank you all sincerely for your time during today's webinar. We are very thankful that you chose to take the time and view this today. We'd like to wish you all good health, positivity, and safety. And if you do want to chat with us a little bit further, please feel free to reach out to us.